Hello, everyone, and welcome to Verizon Network Fleet's Why Advanced Analytics is Important for Your Fleet webinar. My name is Jana Turley, and I lead the webinars for Verizon Network Fleet. I'll be your moderator today, taking your questions for the presenters throughout the broadcast so they may address them during our question and answer session. And while we wait for everyone to join the webinar here today, I'll cover just a few housekeeping items. First, today's webinar is scheduled for approximately 30 minutes and includes a question and answer session at the end. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar, and you may do so by entering a question using the questions button within your webinar player. Also within your webinar player, should you wish to view this presentation in full screen or modify the volume, you can find those controls in the bottom right. If you'd like to download the slides from today's presentation, you can access those as well as other related documents from the attachments button. And last, if you miss any part of today's presentation, this webinar will be made available for on-demand viewing within minutes of the conclusion. And with that, our presenter today is Amin Amini of Verizon Network Fleet. Amin is a fleet telematics expert focused on the government sector. In his role, he's responsible for educating and delivering telematics technology to city, county, and state entities. And he has 15 years experience in the telecom industry and has been with Verizon for 9.5 years. And with that, Amin, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jana, and thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. So as Jana alluded to, today we're going to talk about advanced analytics and the importance it has to the fleet you have today that's in the field. So when you think about advanced analytics, I simply think of it as having the data behind what's happening. So with that, let's dig in. So, there's a slide, it says it perfectly, right? Imagine improving safety by identifying at-risk drivers or saving on costs by avoiding vehicle breakdowns. So I want you to think of this slide this way. Organizations today need to move beyond historical, or I'll call it rear view, understandings of their business performance, right? We need to start looking more proactive. I'll call it future-proofing our organization. So how can I take data and forecast it for the future, whether that be improving my efficiencies, my productivity, my image, my bottom line cost? So I'll start from the very top of how it works, right? And we'll kind of read this left to right on this screen. So the very left is a picture of a satellite in the sky, and there's a vehicle that's pointing down to. Imagine you have a black box installed in the vehicle, and it's constantly talking to the satellite for real-time location information, right? We then take that information and transmit it through the Verizon wireless network and push it out to any HTML device. And that's where I want to stop and make sure I focus on. That's the beauty of these web-based solutions. Whether you're using a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, a desktop, it doesn't matter. If it has an internet connection, you have a real-time view into your fleet. So whether it be you're in the job site, in the thick of it, you're on vacation, you're at home, but you need real-time information on your fleet, whether it be a rapid response, emergency dispatch, or simply organizing your folks better, you can simply log on and have a view of your entire fleet with just a couple clicks. So the agenda for today, right? So we're going to talk about route activity, the driving behavior when they're in the road, the vehicle utilization, or it's better known as fleet utilization, the fuel usage or consumption, and the maintenance and project managing of maintenance of your vehicles. So route activity, right? So what is route activity? So it's simply being able to use GPS coordinates to get the data behind your fleet. So I want you to think about it this way. Today, when your fleet or your vehicle leaves your bay, your shop, whatever location it starts at, and then it returns at the end of the day, in most cases, you probably don't have a view of what happened in between, except for the work order or the statement of work that 8 things were done, 8 things were delivered, 8 things were accomplished. However, can you dig behind those 8 things to find out how that activity happened? Can you find out precise location? Perhaps you need to add another job to the day. Could you perhaps view the analytical data to see, are we being efficient enough within those 8 jobs, and could I add more jobs, or do I need less jobs within a day? So imagine the data you can get via an analytical system by just having the view once they leave your location. So you think about, how does this help? How does this come into play? You're simply increasing visibility. The view that you didn't have before, and I'll call it the rear view mirror, right? The only view that we had before analytical solutions or telematics solutions was what the end result was. And then when you think about it, you can better estimate how long jobs take. Today, the definition of how long a job takes to you might be how long the driver took to be in the field before they came back for the next job, or how long simply they told you. And I'll call that perception-based decisions or perception-based criteria. Or could you simply better predict arrival times? I'll use a neat example. Imagine a fleet of DOT dump trucks that are on the road because a grader is going over the gravel and pulling all the stuff up and dumping it into a truck. I've seen many instances where there's 7 or 8 empty dump trucks sitting there just so they're ready once the one ahead of them gets full. If you had a telematics solution that literally told you when a truck entered a certain work zone and when it left a certain work zone, could you better dispatch your vehicles instead of having sitting labor time, and even worse, sitting idle time and fuel used? Then when you think about what's the benefit, what's the end result of all this? Think about if it's a public works organization, long-haul trucking, or a local construction business. How much can that historical data on the driver routes and their activities give you when it comes to improving efficiencies or increasing your bottom line? If you had that extra view into your fleet, that analytical view into it, what changes could you make right away to give you a bottom line impact? So driving behavior is the next piece for you. So think about driving behavior this way. Telematics provides a wealth of information specific to driving behavior, like speeding. Today, when your drivers are on the road, simply the only way you know they're speeding is one of 2 ways. One, there's a citation, they got a speeding ticket. Or 2, you have constituents or residents or people calling in and saying, I saw vehicle XYZ with your logo on it, cruising 80 and a 50. But if you had a solution like this, now you have fact-based data of speeding, when it happened, how long it happened for, and where it happened. Think about harsh braking or harsh cornering. What does that do to your vehicle's maintenance schedules? Do you have to replace brakes more, shocks more, rotors more? Do you have to replace your suspension more? If you could simply reduce the behavior, can you get longer maintenance out of your vehicles, longer maintenance life cycle? And then when you take all of that behavioral data and you think about, you fix the maintenance issues because now you reduce the speeding and you reduce accident rates because less speeding, and you reduce less brake changes, and you do all the things right. If you coach to these behaviors, to the better behaviors, what kind of impact could it have to your organization? And then how does the analytics come into play, right? The end of the day. If you can simply work one-on-one with each driver to pinpoint their specific behavior or challenge, could you better manage your fleet? Could you potentially identify future risks? Look, when you talk to a risk management officer of any organization, one of their biggest challenges is, I can't predict what's going to happen. I don't have the data to look at it, analyze it, and fix my organization accordingly. With telematics, you do now. So what's the benefit to your fleet, right? Why is this beneficial? You can simply work towards increasing safety. The best way I've seen my clients implement this is rewarding the best behaviors, the people with the least amount of speeding incidents, the people with the least amount of hard braking, the people with the least amount of idling. When you think about all these behaviors, if you reward and recognize the top, as human nature, the rest of us will follow. Oh, one screen too many. Let me go back. All right, vehicle utilization or fleet utilization. So I want you to think of it this way. Today, if you have a fleet of 20 vehicles, 50 vehicles, 100 vehicles, 1,000 vehicles, you know the vehicles are in your lot and you know they leave. So today you might say, Amin, I manage my fleet utilization. Every week I get odometer readings for my vehicles. I enter it into a spreadsheet. And then at the end of the month, I'll analyze how many miles each vehicle was driven. And perhaps that's how you might base today your vehicle purchases, your lease renewals, your maintenance schedules. So think about if you had simply with a couple clicks of a button, you can have the miles driven, the engine hours, the number of trips within those days. Think about how much that data could help you, whether it's you want to analyze it and see if you have too much fleet and there's too many vehicles sitting around. If you have too little fleet, am I taking too many trips with the same vehicles, and could I be more productive if I added more vehicles? Or maybe your answer is, Amin, I just want to get longer life cycle out of my vehicles. Today, my refresh rate might be 3 years, 5 years, 7, 10, 12, whatever it might be, depending on the class of vehicle. If you could better equalize the usage of the vehicles in your fleet, could you add an extra year out of each vehicle? What would that do to your bottom line? So how does the analytics come in play? Again, looks at the vehicle utilization in a predictive model versus a rear view model. You now know which vehicles will be sitting and when. I'll give you an example of a client of ours. They've made their decisions for lease renewals and vehicle renewals for new fleet vehicles based on perception. In other words, let's say, for example, they have Fords and Chevys. Well, most of the employees say, well, listen, I feel like my Chevys break down a lot less, so next time you get a vehicle, get a Chevy. Now, that's perception-based decision that we've all made in our lifetimes. But if you simply had an analytical solution that you can view how many vehicles are driven the most and compare it against their maintenance schedules, and you have fact-based data, what would that do to your next vehicle refresh decision? And what could that decision do to your bottom line? So why is it beneficial to your fleet? What's in it for you? The knowledge can be used to positively impact your organization's bottom line. Better predicting utilization helps fleet managers improve vehicle resale. If you could simply balance out the miles used, so every vehicle is being used as equally as possible, could you resell it for more at the end of its life? Because you have lower miles now across the board. Fuel usage, right? I call fuel usage or consumption the silent killer of any budget. Fuel today might be $2.50, and tomorrow it could be $3, $4, $1. It's so unpredictable. So we need, as organizational leaders, to predict what the consumption is going to be and how to lessen the impact of the fuel surcharges or fuel costs. So how can you do that? Maybe you can coach drivers to reduce idle times. Perhaps you say, Amin, my vehicles today should only idle at XYZ customer stops, but they shouldn't be idling when they go to a gas station or when they go to a convenience store or when they're sitting in the bay refilling their truck or vehicle. So if you could simply find out when they're idling, where they're idling, how long they're idling, and even get real-time alerts on certain idle thresholds, could you reduce fuel consumption? Think about this. On medium-duty vehicles or larger, on average, every 1 hour of idle time is 1 gallon of fuel. So I want you to think about that. How easy is it to idle for a simple 15 minutes per day? Very simple. In fact, I do it too often. So if you take that number of 15 minutes a day times 7 days, that's essentially 2 hours of idle time or 2 gallons of gas. Think about that now. Extrapolate that number across your entire fleet. And now think about that number, and what if it's 30 minutes a day or an hour a day of idle? What would you do? And then think about preventing unauthorized vehicle use, right? So look, you're fueling up your fleet of vehicles. I'll use a construction company, for example. And they're fueled up right now for the week's jobs. But perhaps your vehicles are being used for side efforts. Now they're using your fuel, adding more miles, affecting your bottom line. But if you had a GPS analytical system, could you identify those situations and stop that behavior? So how does it come into play? Imagine doing a month-over-month or year-over-year analysis by driver to see their fuel consumption, to see their miles driven, to see their idle time. If you can do that year-over-year or week-over-week or month-over-month analysis, could you make a change that would positively impact your organization? And then imagine being able to forecast your fuel budget. If you knew today exactly how many odometer miles were driven last year, so you can forecast the same miles or same miles plus 10%, however you want to forecast it, but you have data-based numbers. And then what's the benefit? So while fuel prices fluctuate up and down, by knowing the historical usage, you have a good real prediction based on your future costs. You can also use the driver data to change the behaviors, and I'll keep saying idle time. Imagine how much fuel is used for that. And then maintenance. So I want you to think about it this way. Maintenance has two prongs for me. One, it's knowing what's going on with your vehicle when it's in the field. I'll give you a real-life example. I have a municipality today that one of their biggest issues was when vehicles came in for service because an engine light came on, etc. Oftentimes when asking the driver, they'd find out that light has been on for 2 weeks, but the driver has been too busy to bring it in. So when you think about that, if you have something going on in your vehicle for 2 weeks and you let it ride and you drive it more, what kind of potential damage are you doing to that vehicle? And how are you increasing the maintenance costs? So imagine having a solution that not only gives you all the GPS data we just talked about and all the analytical data, but it even gives you diagnostic trouble codes. What if I told you it'll not only tell you current trouble codes, i.e. an engine light on, but it'll even give you pre-codes, which is the codes that hit a vehicle's computer before the light comes on the dash. If you had that information and you had that real-time alert on your fleet, could you then make a real-time decision of whether to bring that vehicle in for service now or later without waiting for someone to tell you it's acting goofy or something's happening? The second prong to maintenance is being able to project manage your maintenance. I'll use an example for you. I have a municipality that they have the sergeant go out every week and collect odometer readings from every vehicle. This is how they project manage their maintenance. Based on that, they will then project manage how many miles each vehicle should have before oil change, tire rotation, etc. What if you had a solution that not only can you get real-time odometer readings, engine hour readings, miles driven, but you can even set up alerts and pre-schedule your vehicles. You can tell our system, alert me when a vehicle hits 3,000 miles and it's for oil change, and alert me every 5,000 miles for rotation. You can pre-schedule your maintenance one time, and you are rest assured there's no more manual process. So how does the analytics come into play for you? You can identify common maintenance issues. If you're able to pull historic diagnostic trouble codes, could you then identify what vehicle fleets have worked better for you than others? Can you better predict what parts you'll need in the future for replacement? And can you identify poor driving based on the wear and tear? I'll give you an example of this one. I have a DOT in the south that has 12 very large dump trucks, okay, for highway construction. 11 of the 12 have been getting brake changes every 2.5 years. One of the 12 has needed new brakes every single year for the past 3 years or 4 years. The customer was so concerned, he actually called the manufacturer, had them take that truck back to look at it so they can tell him what's wrong with it. He thought it was a defect. They came back saying there's nothing defective. He used our analytical solution to find out that driver had 10 more instances a month than the rest of them on hard braking. What was it doing? Creating now a replacement every single year. How much cost impact did it have not only on material, but on labor? By simply having this analytical data, they can see that information. They took action, changed the behavior. Now that vehicle's playing ball as well. What's the benefit, right? So by you adjusting the preventative maintenance schedules to better fit any of your demands, imagine that. Improve vehicle uptime, and it helps your operations be more productive. That's what we all want at the end of the day, is to be able to keep our fleet healthy, safe, and efficient, and in the field. All right. So key takeaways, what I hope you took away from today. Advanced fleet analytics, it's made possible through a telematics system. They should include the following characteristics. Predictive analytics. Can we look ahead a little bit? Can we look at prescriptive analytics? What should we do based on this data? Geospatial analytics. And then, of course, operational intelligence. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Jana, I wanted to pass it back to you, and I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar.
Thank you so much, Amin. So before we get started today for the question and answer session, I'd like to cover just a couple items. First, your feedback is important to us, so please take a minute to rate our webinar, and you can do that by selecting the rate button within your webinar player. And second, the recording of today's webinar will be available for your viewing shortly after we finish here today. And with that, let's open it up for some questions. Amin, for you, the first question that we have is, how far back in history are you able to look at the data?
Great question. So our web portal will hold the data in there for 12 months back. However, we maintain that data for essentially ever in our back-end servers. So if you need information farther than 1 year back, you can simply reach out to our customer service team and they'll pull that date range for you.
Thank you, Amin. So the next question that we have is around driver identification. Is there any type of driver identification out there? So for example, if you have multiple drivers accessing the same vehicle?
We absolutely do. So motor pool situation that you're explaining, Jana, is very common. We have a solution called Driver ID. Essentially, it's a key fob and a key fob reader that's mounted to the dash. So when a driver enters a vehicle, they simply scan that key fob, then it identifies the driver to the vehicle.
Awesome, thank you. The next question we have is around fuel card integration. And their question is, are we able to integrate fuel cards?
We are. So today, we have two major players that we integrate with already turnkey. One is WEX. The other is Voyager. We can also do Right Express. And the beauty of fuel card integration, I'll explain why most customers like this piece of it. Today, for fuel cards, every time an employee pumps fuel at a gas station with their fuel card, they essentially will enter in their odometer reading. That creates not necessarily an exact science behind the odometer. As well, one of the fears of fuel card usage is, are they fueling our company vehicle, our organizational vehicle, and not their personal? So our solution will essentially, we'll call it fuel fraud, where it'll match the GPS location of your company asset with the gas station or where the fuel card was used to prevent any kind of fraud.
Thanks, Amin. The next question we have is, what's the smallest fleet size you typically see this solution being implemented for?
So just a couple weeks ago, we implemented it for a 2-vehicle township. About 2 months ago, we deployed it for 1,500 vehicles. So it really just depends. There is no minimum or maximum threshold because if you think about it, even if you only have 1 or 2 vehicles, you still need the visibility into your fleet. So I don't think size really matters in this instance.
That's really great to know. Thank you, Amin. So the next question is around maintenance. Do all GPS systems produce DTC codes for every vehicle?
No. So no, they don't. Certain vendors will. Network Fleet does. As far as the vehicle or the parameters of the vehicle for diagnostic information, just remember that the vehicle needs to be 1996 or newer, which is when OBD2 ports were really mandated. And if it has the OBD2 port and it's 96 and newer, you can do it with Network Fleet.
Great, thank you. And regarding to theft and tampering, does the system notify you if your device has been disconnected?
It does. It's called the Lost Power Alert, which actually is a really nice alert. Lost Power Alert will tell you if the wires were cut, device was unplugged. You get an immediate alert notification. And that's the beauty of our alerts, by the way. I know I touched on it quite a few times during the presentation. Whether you want it for speeding alerts, idle time alerts, lost power alert, whatever it might be, alerts are real time. And you can have alerts go to as many recipients as you want via text or email. So, yes, you can get that lost power alert.
Thanks, Amin. And the next question is in regards to installation. Can the system interface with other systems?
Like integration into other softwares? The answer is yes. So Network Fleet does have open APIs. What that basically means is we're willing to feed our data into any system out there. Now, it's contingent on will that system accept our data, right? And will that system provider, whatever the software might be, are they willing to write the code to accept our information? We have canned integrations with some organizations already. For example, AssetWorks or Esri GIS. So we do already have some canned integrations, but if it's ad hoc, the answer is yes, but the other party has to be willing to play ball as well.
Thanks, Amin. We have another question specific to compliance reporting, specifically for the IFTA. They want to know if they're able to download this information into, Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of our data, right? So maybe it's a trip report, maybe it's a fleet utilization report, however you want to build the parameters for it. Yes, you can export it into a CSV, which is an Excel file. You can do it into PDF. There's multiple variations of it. The other beautiful part about our solution, outside of alerts and all of the analytical data, is that you can schedule these reports. So in the case of compliance, let's assume that you schedule this report to run for all of your vehicles every Sunday night. So Monday you have the report for the prior week. You absolutely can schedule it, and it gets delivered to you via email in that CSV format for you to do whatever with.
Thanks so much, Amin. So we have time for one more question. And we have someone who wants to know how they could get started and what the cost is.
So cost varies, but realistically what you want to think about is cost is around sub $1 a day per vehicle. And it depends on segment, type of business, organization, et cetera. But you imagine it's less than $1 a day per vehicle. And how to get started, easiest way would be to contact Network Fleet via email. And we will then assign you to an account manager and have someone reach out to you right away.
Perfect, thank you. So that concludes today's question and answer session. And I want to thank you, Amin, for an informative presentation today on how advanced analytics can have a significant impact on fleet operations. And if we were unable to get to your questions here today, we'll make sure to have an account manager follow up with you shortly. Have a great day, everyone.